Greetings, rise and shine, brethren. We are the World Global Reset Restoration Network family, comprised of 198 sovereign nations with over 7 billion sovereign principles, being of one mind, one heart, and one spirit, walking together under the divine principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I come to you as a voice in the wilderness to introduce to you a man. No, not just any man, but a man sent by Yah Allah to redeem mankind. Dr. Hindu I.L. Henderson, the Adak Chief Justice of the Universal World Court, and who's also known as Yehoshua Mashiach, the Son of Man. The information that you will be receiving in this and other videos you won't get from anywhere else on the planet. Hear the many truths and fulfillment of the laws, judgments, and sentencings from our Creator, Father Yah, as well as the fulfillment of the true interpretation of the Holy Scriptures and books. Now, without further ado, Dr. Hindu I.L. Henderson with his beloved host, Shelley Bowling.
One of those very ones finding themselves caught in that quicksand is none other than Benjamin Thomas Netanyahu. Still trying to annex land that belongs to the Palestinian people. As the world already knows that Israeli is not Israel, and knows that the land belongs to the Palestinian people, Benjamin Netanyahu is still trying to coerce the very ones in the United States that call themselves under that religious system of Christianity to support yet once again a continuation of human rights abuses in a land that does not belong to them. The nations have already declared that they know that that land does indeed belong to the Palestinians, and that that land is being restored back to the true owners of the land, the true Hebrew Israelites, for them to be able to go forward under the 5 divine principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Your Redeemer is here, and that restoration process will take place. With that, I will yield back to you, sir.
As we return, we must bring out the fact to the whole entire world as a system, knowing that it is being destroyed. We have to get the Earth, this planet Earth, to recognize now of the true geographical areas on the planet. And it has been so confused by those men that be philosophers of some European world. It has been totally confused to the point where most of the time now we can look to the fact that some of the elders of our past used to make a statement, and we have to somewhat agree with them. And one would say that they're so confused they don't know if they're going or coming. And we have to agree to an extent of knowing that this is a fact upon the planet when dealing with many of the nations now. Many of the nations don't know how they came about. Many of the nations now holding on to something in which they deem to be a heroic act of some would-be so-called relatives of theirs known as founding fathers. But they have to admit, your founding father didn't find anything. He stole a lot, and he's still in the process of stealing from the grave. And even though he believed that he had taken all of the treasures to the grave with him, just as he found the treasures in the grave with the pharaohs and the Sadducees and the Pharisees when he first came. He came upon a land where he realized that those gold and silver objects that had been made by man's hand were in the graves with him. And he himself believed that he was going to be the next pharaoh. He would have been great king on the earth. He took all of his treasures at the same time along with him to his grave. But his greatest treasure was nothing more than a secret locked in a box. And that secret was locked in a box with nothing more than he was a thief. By way of lying, changing identity, changing locations, just based upon writing of some would-be so-called word of his. He was able to manipulate, trick the people, change the people's thought, and even educate them and dumb them down to a point where they themselves would not even know that he had done so. Yes, for all of the great pharaohs are in their graves now, and they have their treasures in their graves with them. So you're not going to inherit anything that would have been given by some great pharaoh or some so-called king or such in which you yourself would have been tied to. As we look to those nations now, if we might deem them still to be nations, no matter how small they may look in size, we have to say that they have a large ego of ignorance based upon Israeli, and which still tries to classify itself as Israel, knowing that Israel is in a place that they have deemed to be the United States of America. That Israel is still there, broken down as one of the 5 would have been nations. And the people would have been known as Israelites, Hebrew Israelites. And they would have been classified, if one might even think that the words was interchangeable, which they're not, they would have been known as the Jews. So at best, right now, Thomas Benjamin Netanyahu cannot even utter the word Jews and claim it. For he's not a Jew, and a Jew does not exist unless he is a jeweler, and he himself has never worked in that part of the department store. He's never been a jeweler. He can't fashion jewelry. If at best, he might still lock the hats in which holds down that little chain in Comedian, which might be able to play some sliding diamond on it. But he himself is not a Jew. And now, as they began to tell the United States of America that if that be the truth of a Jew, and if there be any Jews that might even threaten the Jews in the US of A, whereby if it's annexed, that land, that it will put a fear or a threat upon those that are classified as Jews in America. But this too is a title which has gone for when we listen to people like Billy Crystal, and I'm pretty sure the world knows Billy Crystal. He was one of Billy Crystal. He was a guy who hung around with one man by the name of Muhammad Ali. He became a real good friend of Muhammad Ali based upon the fact that he was nothing more than a comedian who used to come about through a world where he would impersonate Muhammad Ali. The impersonation was a great one based upon the fact that to see him in person being nothing more than a little scrawny Caucasian, Caucasian-looking male, opposed to being Muhammad Ali, which would have been a man that was over the 6-foot stature and a black man. These two would have been totally opposite in a world whereby we knew during those days, but at the same time, much alike in the world we know today. For both of them were only designed freedom. Their desire was to be free, their people to be free. And even Billy Crystal, which claimed the Jewish heritage by way of even calling himself a Hebrew, did not realize that he himself did not even fit the description of a Hebrew or Israelite or Jew because of his skin color. And more so, Muhammad Ali would have fit that description of the Hebrew Israelites, of those that would have been classified as the true Jews on the planet. United Nations, I bring these illustrations based upon the fact that you too understand and recognize these names and these people because they became well known, not just in the United States, but they became well-known nations and to the nations with an S by way of entertainment. But this is not the reason for bringing it up an example. It is the reason to bring it up an example based upon the fact that people like Thomas Benjamin Netanyahu is still confused about who he is. He has no idea what nation he came from. He has no idea what nationality he came from. He has not yet done a blood, DNA, and RNA test on himself to even recognize where he came from or who he came from or how he came to be. He has not yet done so. Just as Pope Francis, George Jorge Bergoglio, has not yet done a DNA and RNA test to identify himself about where he came from or how he came to be or what nationality or even by what race he will be classified as if given any would-be race over that which would be known as the tribal and the tribes of the universe. He has no clue. So at best now, we live in a world of total confusion, where those that deem themselves to be the true children of the only God of the universe, Yah Allah, do not fit the description. And no, they wasn't by some chance accidentally placed into a household where they were adopted by some father and mother. that would have just accepted them as being their own. No, they were those who they forced themselves upon a family and then classified themselves as being that family while destroying that family out, as they would think, of existence. Right now we have 147 nations that have called and made a call to halt aid to Israeli settlements. And we have to recognize the word that's being used here. It says Israeli. For one has named Israeli settlements as Israel. And it seems that the whole entire United States of America once upon a time was confused about the land of Israel opposed to the settlement or the area on the land which is known to be Israeli. And thereby in the past, America has been always agreeable to destroy anyone that was in the same said land as Israeli or the settlement that Israeli was in, believing that that was the true Israel of the Holy Scriptures and of the Holy Bible. And only up until now, they have begun to recognize that the Israel has always been in the United States of America. It will always be in America. And just because one wants to come in to name some land Jerusalem, or to name some land Israel, or to name some land Bethlehem, does not give it the true, would-be honest respect and protection that Yah Allah, God of the universe, the only God himself, would be giving to it as his people. And whereby now, because America, the United States, have set out to make one man take the fall as if though he would be Cosmodo once again in the tower, they have chose to use their would-be so-called superpower leader, and which once upon a time held honor from everyone on the planet. But it seems now that even his would-be so-called people of the United States of America would want to hand him over that he might be able to be determined the wicked man of the West or the wicked man of the Northwest, and thereby they would be able to destroy him and at the same time hide the secrets in which they believe that has been hidden for now a millennium. United Nations, no one is ignorant enough to believe, for everyone has realized it is also disavowed that Israeli sovereignty over East Jerusalem, a territory which has been said to be seized by Israel from Jordan during what would have been a 60-day war back in 1967, and which has only been formally annexed since the year of 1980. But we must realize that even that being said, this land, Israeli, has no sovereignty because Israeli has no land, and Israeli is an area that was made up by the United States of America only thereafter. So 1967 would have been a time in which it would have been really trying to explode upon the upon the stage of what is known as a world of freedom. And thereby, knowing that the land was still owned and has always been lived there by the autonomous or by those that were classified to be the indigenous people of the land known as Palestinians. And whereby now, to undermine the President of the United States of America, who America themselves have taught all of about 243 years now that the land was to be saved for Israel, only now have the whole entire American so-called government decided to vote against the President's would-be so-called his would-be command or his decision-making purpose or his decision-making status or his decision-making reason. why he himself is even under the impression that somehow the land of Israel is the so-called true land of Israel, which is not. But this is not his own doing, but it has been all of those who even were prior to him sitting in the seat of what is known as the United States of America. They have had 44 men prior to him that all have sat there under the agreement that some land that was called Israel, just because they named it that, were to be the land of God or the people of God, and thereby they have protected it up to this point. As we go forward now, knowing that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights now has an anniversary of over 70 plus years, we must realize that now to be an activist now brings about that in which no would-be so-called discrimination will be placed upon you. But we must realize that we must go back now to look at the Palestinian rights of return to their land must be not just the key or a legal key, but we must also realize that the Zionist conquest is still upon them. And that Zionist conquest has now swept the whole world over, knowing that Zionism is nothing more than a system whereby the state of Israel has used it as a cornerstone to be able to classify itself Israel, knowing it's nothing more than a cornerstone of Israelis. We must understand that the European Jews were known as descendants of the ancient so-called Hebrews of Palestine, if they might classify themselves to be such now. But knowing that the true Hebrews were not just been part of Palestine, but they came all the way from a place known as the United States of America, and they were dark melanated people and had nothing to do with white European Jews, as which now present themselves, that are nothing more than those that are classified by true would-be acknowledgement of being an Anunnaki Jew or an Orthodox Jew, or a Jew who really does not carry any of the blood, but he carries every of the might of what we know to be some activists now on a stage to try to concur with the rights of the people after so many years of being a non-concurrent.
And for those in the area of Israeli still trying to take advantage and still claiming sovereignty, that they have no sovereignty. They have no nation. You have stolen the land from the Palestinians. They are the true sovereign people of that land, and the entire world knows that. In fact, recently, world leaders have been coming out and warning Israeli against continuing forward with annexation of more of the West Bank. The treaty has already been given to the Palestinian territories. That land has been established. And Israeli, having no treaty, has no sovereignty. So trying to claim sovereignty when you have none is an effort in futility. You know what you must do. Restore back the people to their land.